Kia ora koutou, ko nekaho. I'm a UX designer at Boost, and I'm honoured to have been part of the creation of Digital Pacific. This was a really interesting project for us as it kicked off during the first COVID lockdown of 2020 and was the first project which we delivered completely remotely. There was a lot of uncertainty for me starting a fully remote project while working from home with a 2-month-old daughter. Since then, she's become a lot more helpful. As a UX designer, I need to understand and balance the needs of both the business and end users. Today, I wanted to talk about how a co-design approach helps with this, and look at some of the design challenges and learnings for a project in a completely remote environment. 2 key learnings I want to discuss today are the value of the co-design process, and that remote usability testing offers just as much value as in-person testing. In co-design, you design your digital experience with the active involvement of the users and stakeholders to make sure the experience meets the user's needs. At Boost, we work in an agile way. We focus on designing, developing, and testing the slice of software that will deliver the most value for users first, then iterating on that. In the case of Digital Pacific, this was the ability for users to be able to browse and learn more about items. The co-design process worked very well with our iterative approach, and we quickly saw the value of bringing the stakeholders into the design process. It let us check in with our group on a regular cadence and understand what we needed to improve for the next iteration of the experience we were creating together. This also shortened the feedback loop and enabled discussions, questions, and opportunities that may not have presented themselves otherwise. As the designer on the project, this gave me a rich perspective of the problems we were trying to solve and the experience we wanted to create. It let me understand very early on the limitations our users face and what the desired outcomes of the stakeholders and the content partners were. I remember hearing a story from the co-design group about a family member who used to climb to the top of a hill every day so that they could get better reception to use social media and check their emails. The story became a reference point for why performance was so important. It reinforced that one of the biggest limitations we were designing for was limited bandwidth. A large number of users in the Pacific are accessing digital experiences via a slower 3G connection, and it was very important to us that our experience was super lightweight and quick to load. That meant that we viewed all our development and design decisions through a performance lens and built a page size limit into our deployment pipeline. We also undertook usability testing with users in the Pacific remotely via Zoom. Traditionally, I would run usability testing in person face-to-face, but because of the lockdown, this of course was not possible. It was my first time running usability testing remotely, and I was unsure what to expect and if it would be as effective. So I wrote my testing script and scenarios as normal and scheduled some meetings with some end users in the Pacific. I asked them to visit our staging site on their mobile device and share their screen so that I could observe their interactions. I did have to give some users some help to find the control in Zoom to share their screens on mobile, but I found that I gained as much insight as I would have in person. One of the best things about the testing for me was seeing the users' reactions as they browsed the site. I remember how excited and surprised people were when they discovered this taonga they didn't even know existed. So we got 2 great things out of the testing. One being that we learned what we needed to change to improve the experience, and the other being that we saw the overall impact of the experience and that it was going to be really positive. As we continued to co-design and test our progress with users, we were able to develop and iterate on the experience to make it what it is today, and I'm very proud to have helped to have influenced the direction of this amazing project. The 2 key things I'd like you to take away today are the co-design process enables design to be informed by a diverse range of perspectives through close collaboration between the project team and key stakeholders. And distance is not a barrier when it comes to usability testing, even with users in the Pacific on slower internet connections. If I were to do this project again, I would try to gather more user insights earlier by getting more Pacific end users along to the discovery workshop. And I'd also try to run user testing even earlier in the project, preferably within the first month of the project kicking off. In a remote project, engaging with key stakeholders and users early and often is always possible, which gives you the knowledge and insight needed to ensure you can successfully achieve your project's goals. If anybody would like to know more about our process on this project or learn more about us, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to answer any questions you guys may have. Kia ora rawa atu, ka kite anō.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Nabukalevu te maunga, ko te rikana kelo te awa, ko Ngāti Whiti te iwi, ko te mōdi toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Tim Kong, and I'm here today in my capacity as the Program Manager of the Pacific Virtual Museum pilot. Ulavanaka to each of you attending, and whawhatai to the NDF organisers and those from the conference team for their incredible work behind the scenes, online and offline, to enable this event through these interesting times. I also want to acknowledge Opeta Alefaio, who is joining us in the chat sessions for Q&A. He is, to put it simply, a legend in this field and across the Pacific, and it has been a personal and professional privilege to have him alongside us throughout this project. In preparation for this talk, I went back and watched Mark Crookston's presentation at NDF in November of 2019, just over 2 years ago. He spoke then of delivering in collaboration, of working with a co-design group, and of recruiting the team. I am the first of the team that Mark and Fiona Fieldson hired just a few weeks after that presentation. In that video from 2019, Mark spoke of doing a co-design workshop in January, February 2020. That was the first task that my colleague Tapatukura Raya and I set out to deliver. It was to be hosted in Tamaki Makaurau. It was to bring together about 30 people from Saipan, French Polynesia, Hawaii, Fiji, Australia, and across Aotearoa. It was going to include a special hosted visit to Auckland Museum. It was going to be facilitated by Turatini Ra'a from Pacifica Arts, and it was going to have legendary food options. It was also going to take place on March 18th and 19th, 2020. Of course, the world changed entirely on the 18th of March, as the Eurovision Song Contest, which was due to take place in Rotterdam, was cancelled for the first time ever in its 64-year history. The 19th of March, of course, was also the day that Aotearoa closed its borders, and our dream of in-person engagement with those from across the Pacific Islands ended. Looking back at that moment, I'm really proud to say that we actually did cancel that workshop on the 10th of March, in no small part to support and look after our co-design group members, who, just like us at that point in time, were facing the looming uncertainty of COVID-19. This honouring of the people walking alongside us and recognising them in their places has been a critical aspect of the manaakitanga we have sought to create and to share throughout this work, and I believe it has been crucial to our success. Most Pacific people are unaware that the GLAM sector holds so many objects, texts, photographs, and records. And so our elevator pitch for this project has always been to make visible and accessible the digitized cultural heritage of the Pacific for people in and of the Pacific. The metaphor we use to describe the site is that we are a bridge between the worlds of Pacific people and the worlds of the GLAM sector. In some ways, like this bridge on my father's home island of Kundabu, simple and practical. Using this metaphor pushes at the default of digital design, which is that you want people to stay on your site. Instead, our metaphor means that we've made it easy to find content partners' metadata and then easy to access that source content on those websites. To help us do this, we designed the site to reflect some of the Pacific and some of the elements of the Pacific back to the users, enabling them to see their island, their ocean, their stars, their horizons. We wanted users to think, I'm Samoan, show me the Samoa stuff, and get to it quickly. We designed around a really easy to navigate visual identity and one with quite simple controls. We designed and built a really neat self-sorting search function. We broke some conventions by combining categories to make it simpler and easier to get to them. I recall at a design meeting pointing at the interface and saying, this is the text option. And one of the librarians asking me, does that mean published text, unpublished journals, unpublished text, journals, magazines? What is it? I think I kind of shrugged and said, all of those? Is that okay? Damon Celesta said to us in one of our early sessions, it's great that Te Papa has all these tapa beaters, beautifully photographed and with metadata as examples of cultural heritage. But in the islands, they mostly sit on the kitchen shelf until you need them to make tapa. That made us reflect on how, for Pacific people, cultural heritage and knowledge is often expressed and passed on in things like dance and food preparation and singing, sports, navigation, the planting of crops, and so on. And it made us think, how does the shelving and cataloging systems of our mostly Western-based institutions, how are they designed? And how do they accommodate Pacific cultural heritage, as they are mostly designed for words and images? And as a result, how do they store or look after and support Pacific culture? As a result of our reframing of our scope, we are reaching out and harvesting from a number of Pacific-based partners that make use of platforms like YouTube, and then also distribute these records via Facebook and other social media channels. I appreciate this pushes a little bit at our definitions of glam sector standards, but I think it says something about us if we were to consider denying the work that the team at NGO Pacifica Renaissance have done since 2014. That work has been a focus on recording oral histories of those from Chuk, from Kozrai and Pohnpei, and listening to their stories, recording their stories in their languages, whilst those people sit on their islands. And I think it would tell something about us if we were to deny that work on the basis of their choice of digital platform. Many of those in the videos from NGO Pacifica Renaissance have since passed on, and if this work had not been done, their knowledge would have also passed on. Likewise, the work of Patrick Longo of Lolongo Nui, the Solomon Islands National Museum, or Dr. Teresi Vunindilo, all leverages the platforms that they can access and utilize from where they are in the Pacific. Each of them are using digital platforms to celebrate, uplift, and share Pacific culture, centered in a Pacific need and a Pacific perspective. So we're very proud to meet these Pacific providers where they are, highlighting their work and holding them up as equals alongside established GLAM institutions. Like DigitalNZ and Trove, we are not a repository. We leverage and present copies of metadata from our content partners. We rely on the authority and due diligence of the content partner around metadata and honor that. We're not into translation of metadata for the sake of an English audience only. We simply match the fields in our schema to the data that we're getting to ensure that our front end functions well. And so we welcome metadata in any language. If that content is written in Chamorro or Tokpasin or Navasa Vakaviti, then we will use and highlight that. And I think that's a powerful point of difference in terms of engaging with Pacific providers. Traditional knowledge label fields are also built into our schema. And what that means is that if your organization is applying TK labels at the source, derived from working alongside iwi and other indigenous communities, we will reflect those labels. At this point, I'd also like to acknowledge the work of Jane Anderson, and Maui Hudson, and their very supportive conversations during our pilot. Importantly, I think for us, we never take metadata. We always just use copies. And so in the event of our site being shuttered, our content partners lose nothing because they are always the holders of metadata. In a philosophical sense, in terms of the Pacific-wide experience of colonialism and the legacy of taking, this point has been crucial for me. Digital colonization and appropriation of culture is already taking place, and we could not and cannot be a space that enables that in any way. Each of these design decisions and approaches speaks to the second metaphor we use to describe our site, that it serves as a mirror for our content partners who can view and consider and evaluate their own metadata as a result of seeing it through the designs and through the lens of our site. And if they can or wish to, take action. Lastly, we wrestled with what to call this thing, and I learned two things in leading this part of the process. One, our bias in Aotearoa is that when we say Pacific, we mostly mean Polynesia. And I think that means my reflection would be that we need to actively check that bias when we speak of and to the wider region and the 22 Pacific Island countries and territories across this ocean. Our second learning was that Indigenous doesn't always automatically mean inclusive. For a number in our co-design group, there was a sense that any name should use an Indigenous language. And naturally, this became a debate around which language should be used, given Papua New Guinea alone has over 800. We presented what we thought was a beautiful name to the co-design group, and were then told that it was too Polynesian by our Micronesian and Melanesian colleagues. One of them said plainly that it needed to be English, as problematic as that was, to be inclusive across the Pacific for all. A friend said to me, that must be a very tough conversation. And I replied, it is, but it's also a wonderful conversation because we've never had it. Ultimately, we settled on Digital Pacific, speaking plainly to what we are, digital and of the Pacific, and in particular, using the Tokpasin spelling of this ocean. The Pacific Ocean covers 33% of the surface area of the planet, but because our default mental models of users and designing digitally are mostly based on land and written experiences, the Pacific Island location, their cultures and their people are mostly invisible to us, or they are seen as singular, remote, exotic, idyllic locations. But they are neither invisible and nor should they be romanticized. Each of these locations and the people that are from these cultures are unique, vibrant, living, and enduring in the face of overwhelming challenges of colonialism, of capitalism, and of climate change. As Dr. Teresi Funadilo said to me, pre-contact with the West, our people were astronomers, food scientists, mathematicians, sailors, artists, and navigators in our own right. And we, as Pacific people, need to be reminded of that, to know that, because we don't. Opeta said to us very early on in the design phase, it's one thing for Pacific people to know they had their culture taken from them. It's another thing entirely to not know that the artifacts and records of that culture still exist. And if we have done a small thing to start to bridge that gap, to help Pacific people learn of the existence of their heritage, then I believe we have done a worthy thing. We are very proud of what's been achieved, and I want to acknowledge and lift up my team of Tapatukura Raya, of Mauki, Pamati, Rarotonga, and Tahiti, and Ulu Afasi, of Falalere, Matutu, and Sangone, respectively. They represent a powerful Pacific future for our cultural heritage sector here in Aotearoa. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of our co-design group, whose names you see here on these two slides, and I apologize for those that I've not had space to include, as we've had many who've supported us. I'd like to thank them for their wisdom, for their grace, and for their critical advice throughout this process. Each of them gave of their time and their knowledge as they could, when they could, from where they could, and they did it with grace, humor, detail, and passion. Their many years of striving in this field to protect, honor, and highlight taonga is often unheralded. And to coin a phrase, nevertheless, they persist. And it has been a daily privilege to shine a light on the work that they do. Mark did say it's going to be real cool at that presentation, and I'd like to think he was right. I'm hopeful there will be heaps more coolness to come in the future. We have, I believe, only just begun, and there are more stories to share and more connections to make. So please do get in touch with us. Ngā mihi nui, and vinaka waka levu to all of you for letting me share today. Thank you.